The first
Please
sign
take your
something
seat in
was
the
wrong
back of the
came when the
aircraft
pilot
immediately.
stopped smiling. The cabin had been filled with the low hum of boarding chatter, families arguing over seats, business travelers tapping impatiently on phones, a baby crying somewhere near the back. 17-year-old Malik Johnson stood quietly in the aisle, holding his boarding pass with both hands, careful not to brush against anyone. He wore a hoodie, clean sneakers, and a backpack slung over one shoulder. He had flown before, but today felt different. Maybe it was the way people kept glancing at him a second too long. Maybe it was the tightness in his chest he couldn't explain. As Malik reached his row, a uniformed man blocked his path. "Sir," the pilot said sharply, eyes narrowing. "Where do you think you're going?" Malik blinked, confused. To my seat. 14A. The pilot didn't look at the boarding pass Malik held out. He didn't need to, apparently. His gaze lingered on Malik's face, his hoodie, his backpack. "You need to step out of the aisle." A few heads turned. Malik felt the heat rise in his ears. "Did I do something wrong?" The pilot's jaw tightened. "We've had reports of suspicious behavior. I'm calling security." The words hit like a slap. "I haven't done anything," Malik said, his voice steady but quiet. "I just boarded like everyone else." The pilot had already turned away, speaking into his radio. "Yes. Gate C12. Possible security concern." The cabin fell into an uneasy silence. Phones slowly lifted. A woman across the aisle frowned. A man behind Malik muttered, "Here we go again." Malik stood frozen, heart pounding, suddenly aware of how small he felt in a plane full of strangers. He thought of his mom's voice that morning, telling him she was proud of him. He was flying alone to attend a youth leadership conference, his first big opportunity, a scholarship he'd worked hard to earn. She'd hugged him longer than usual before drop-off, like she knew something heavy was coming. Two security officers appeared within minutes. "Sir, we need you to come with us," one said. Malik swallowed. "Why?" The officer glanced at the pilot, who crossed his arms. "We'll talk outside." As Malik turned to leave, a voice cut through the tension. "Wait." Everyone looked up. A woman stood near the front of the cabin, tall and composed, dressed in a simple gray coat. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her expression calm, but her eyes were sharp with concern. "That young man hasn't done anything wrong," she said. The pilot scoffed. "Ma'am, this is an airline security matter. Please stay seated." The woman didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "On what grounds are you removing him?" The pilot hesitated for half a second. He was acting suspicious. "How?" she asked. Silence. Malik looked at her, confused. He didn't recognize her, but something about her presence made him feel less alone. The pilot's face reddened. "We don't have time for this. Security, please escort him off." The woman stepped into the aisle, placing herself between Malik and the officers. "My name is Evelyn Johnson," she said calmly. "And I'd like you to explain, very clearly, why my son is being treated like a criminal." A ripple moved through the cabin. "Your son?" the pilot repeated. "Yes," she said, placing a hand gently on Malik's shoulder. Malik felt it tremble, just slightly. Not with fear, but with restrained anger. The pilot straightened, regaining his authority. "Ma'am, regardless of who you are, protocol does not include profiling a black teenager for standing in an aisle with a boarding pass," Evelyn interrupted. The security officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. The pilot's tone hardened. "If you interfere, I'll have you removed as well." Evelyn smiled. Faintly. "I wouldn't recommend that." The smile confused him. "And why is that?" She reached into her coat and pulled out her phone. With a few taps, she turned the screen toward him. On it was her identification. Evelyn Johnson, chairwoman and majority owner, Skystream Airlines. The color drained from the pilot's face. The cabin erupted into whispers. "That's the owner." "No way. Oh my God." The pilot's mouth opened, then closed. I didn't know." "No," Evelyn said quietly. "You didn't bother to know." She turned to the security officers. "Thank you, gentlemen. You're dismissed." They didn't hesitate. The pilot stood frozen as Evelyn faced him again. Her voice was calm, but every word landed like weight. "You saw my son and decided he didn't belong. You didn't ask his name. You didn't check his ticket. You didn't see a student, or a leader, or a child with dreams. You saw a threat." Malik felt his throat tighten. He hadn't realized how badly he needed someone to say that out loud. I've flown this airline for years, Evelyn continued. I built it with the promise that everyone would be treated with dignity. Today, you broke that promise. The pilot stammered. I was just trying to keep everyone safe. Safety without fairness is fear, she replied. And fear makes people dangerous. She turned to the cabin. I apologize to every passenger who had to witness this. And especially to my son. She hugged Malik, right there in the aisle. He felt tears sting his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. The pilot was quietly escorted off the plane. The flight departed shortly after, but the air felt different. Lighter. Strangers smiled at Malik as they passed. The woman across the aisle whispered, "You handled that with grace." Malik nodded, still processing everything. As the plane lifted into the sky, he leaned toward his mother. "You didn't tell me you were flying today." Evelyn smiled softly. "I wasn't supposed to. But something told me I should." He looked out the window, watching the ground shrink away. I thought maybe I really did something wrong." She squeezed his hand. "That's the damage people like him cause. They make you doubt your own innocence." "What happens now?" Malik asked. Evelyn's gaze was steady. "Now we make sure this never happens again." Weeks later, the story made headlines. The pilot was terminated. New bias training policies were announced. Evelyn stood before employees and told them the truth, that the airline's greatest failure wasn't a mechanical error, but a moral one. Malik attended his conference and gave a speech of his own. He talked about fear, and dignity, and how power should protect, not punish. When he finished, the room stood and applauded. That night, he called his mom. "I used to think strength meant staying quiet," he said. "Now I know it means standing up, even when your voice shakes." Evelyn smiled on the other end of the line. "And sometimes," she said, "it means arriving exactly when you're needed most." The world didn't change overnight. But one flight did. One moment did. One truth, finally seen, did. And for Malik, that was enough to keep believing that justice, though delayed, can still land safely, if we're brave enough to demand it.